Well, I'm here with Professor John Swinton. John is the professor in practical theology and pastoral care at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. He was given the Oskar Pfister Award by the American Psychiatric Association for making an outstanding contribution to religion and psychiatry in 2018. His latest book is called Becoming Friends of Time, Disability, Timefullness, and Gentle Discipleship. Welcome, John.
Nice to be with you.
So I want to begin by asking you this question. What is Christian hope?
Well, Christian hope is a complex thing because it's an idea and a practice in some senses. So Christian hope is being in the world in a particular way that recognizes the significance of where we are, the fact that we suffer, the fact that we have difficulties, the fact we have issues, but at the same time always reads where we are in the light of what's to come. So it doesn't escape from suffering and pain. It actually helps us to understand it differently. So it gives us something beyond the obvious to look towards and to work towards. So it's something we think about and conceptualize, but also something that we live out.
It's beautiful. And talk to us about your work in particular and how your work relates to hope.
Yeah, that's interesting because I guess most of my work really is underpinned by hope. So the areas I'm interested in are dementia and people with severe mental health challenges. And these are two experiences that very often people just write people off. So if you've got advanced dementia, people assume that you lost yourself and that you have no hope for the future. But when you actually take that understanding of the fact that you remember things is not the point of who you are, actually it's God remembering who you are that is fundamental to all of us, then hope becomes a real possibility even in the more extreme circumstances. And recently I've been doing quite a lot of work with people with severe mental health challenges. And again, if you get a diagnosis of something like schizophrenia, people think, oh, it's hopeless, it's useless. But actually, when you listen to people's experiences, it's very more than possible to find hope and new life, even in the midst of the confusion of something like schizophrenia. The key is that we use the gospel in ways that open up space for all people and then begin to listen to people's experiences. And when you listen to people's experiences, you see that no experience is hopeless in that sense.
That's so beautiful, John. I think often of that quote, that line you just said about it's not so much our memory of God, but God's memory of us. And I shared that with a congregant recently whose wife is suffering from dementia, and it brought him to tears. I mean, just the thought of God remembering us and that being the place of our hope.
Yeah.
You began your work in the healthcare industry before you turned into theology. Is that right? Can you give us a little recap of that?
I did, yes. Well, I worked as a nurse for 16 years, initially in the area of psychiatry, and then I retrained and worked in the area of intellectual disability. And then I kind of spent some time in chaplaincy. I drifted into academia in the early 90s and I've stayed there. But it's that place of formation in the health service that really underpins most of all of the theological stuff that I do. Yeah. It's like my nursing and chaplaincy was my place of formation. Now my theological work is my place of vocation, where I try to make sense of it all in the light of who I think God is, or who God tells me God is.
Amazing. Okay, one final question. I know you're a musician, John. We've done some songwriting together, actually. Yeah. And what, in your view, is a song of hope?
Well, it's funny. One of my favorite songs is an old song, and it's a song that's called Going Back to the Heart of Worship. And the author of that song, he was a very famous, and still is a very famous worship leader, who, the story goes, had a real crisis that I think it was some kind of physical injury that meant he wasn't able to play his instrument. And he suddenly realized that might be the end of his career. And so the song goes, I'm going back to the heart of worship, because they came to the kind of conclusion that actually he'd been mistaken. That it wasn't about him. It never had been about him. It had always been about Jesus. And that he actually had to realign his ministry in a way that was fully in line with that. And when you go back to the heart of worship, and worship can be very deceptive.
Yeah.
You know, because when you're up there and it's singing and people are loving it and there's their hands, you can get so caught up in it that you focus on yourself and not on God. I'm sure you wouldn't, Glenn, but I'm sure some people would.
Right.
And it's that idea of going back to the heart of worship, where you can find hope that can't be taken from you.
That's beautiful. I'm curious. I'm just, as you're talking about this music, oftentimes there's a lot of research that's been done about music and, patients with dementia or Alzheimer's. Is there something there that you've seen about particularly the power of music with that?
There is. I mean, it's absolutely amazing, really. I mean, the way the brain is quite a fascinating thing because it's plastic. You know, if you damage one part of your brain, it can actually reconstruct itself and redirect the messages, the electronic signals to other parts of the brain so you can hear things or you can see things or you can experience things. And sometimes with dementia, it's not that you no longer have the memory, it's that you can no longer access it because the neurons and the synapses have been damaged. And so what the brain very often does is it shifts the signal. So it goes through these pathways that help us to understand music. And by going through these pathways, you access the memory. So when somebody hears certain types of music, they can remember things that they can't remember at any other time. And so while that music is playing, people will have a certain set of memories. And of course, when you remember something, you remember people, remember who you were, you remember emotions and feelings. And so for the time that music is playing, people really can grasp something. So when you see somebody engaging, it's not just like, well, that's nice, it's actually something happening, but only as long as the music plays. So as soon as the music stops, you gradually lose sight of that memory. And so the key is to be with people in that moment. In that moment, to be with them, to support them, to enjoy that moment, and not always be craving after. It's a little bit like Peter on the mountaintop. He really wanted that to start forever and ever, but it's never going to stop forever. And you kind of learn that lesson when you're with people with dementia, that the moment's important, the present's important.
That's so beautiful. Well, thank you so much, John, for your time. Appreciate you chatting with me today about hope. God bless.